Cowboys does it take to do a podcast? I love
Exactly. That might be a good title right there.
it.
So, all right, guys, this is my good friend Pat Muldoon. He's from Michigan, and I guess we'll get into. I met him through Tom Moore, but I guess we got a lot of stuff to talk to before we get to that spot. And I've known Pat for years, but I don't really know where he come from or what he's about. He was always around, so I guess we've never really sat down and talked about your whole life. But I guess if you want to start just telling us a little bit where you're from and all that stuff, Pat.
Yeah, I was born and raised in a little town called Dearborn Heights, Michigan, and and then after school, after college, I moved out here and started a farm not too far from Tom's. Um, we're actually in Rome Township, a little bit south of the town of Onstead, Michigan. If you look for us on the map, we're out in an area called the Irish Hills. Todd's pretty familiar. It's kind of a neat place. Its roots go back to a lot of farming, a whole lot of dairy farming. I myself ran a dairy farm out there at the home place for quite a number of years and milked about 35 Holsteins and really just kind of small family farm like I think a lot of people came up on. So
See, I'm learning stuff already. I had no idea any of that.
if you look on the ceiling in my where we've got the stall barn at the farm now for the horses, you can see the markers where the old milk room used to be, and the stanchion barn. Half the stalls are on one side of that, and the other ones are in where all the old Mueller milk tank used to be. So
Okay, okay, all right, good deal. So I guess more or less a small town kid from up that direction.
yeah, yeah, I always wanted to be around horses. As a kid, spent my summers up in a place in northern Michigan, Alpena, Michigan, working on a big Angus operation, and they raised commercial hay. And that's kind of where it ignited that for me. Originally, I started as a city kid, and then moved out here. Started, working around cattle a lot, and did a lot of AI breeding in the area, and just kind of learned from a lot of the elder men, and people just kind of took me under their wing, and then I got kind of picked up a love for horses. Met Tom Moore and met a whole lot of people through Tom and Raul Rodriguez and his family, his dad Roy, and kind of learned to rope from them. And just we started just kind of plinking around, chasing cattle and working, trying to make better horses and try not to try to learn as much as we could.
Okay. Well, I tried to do a little research, and by research, I went back through some of your Facebook posts. So you were a college athlete then?
Yeah, yeah.
Looks
I
like.
threw the hammer track and field for Eastern Michigan.
Okay.
Had a nice career there, and then had for a little time I was on the United States Olympic weightlifting team, and so got to see a little bit of the United States, meet a whole lot of good people, and got one of those good educations through the NCAA. So
Okay.
a lot of fun. Still go back there quite often. Back in 2018, the university honored me as their distinguished alumni. So that was
I
kind of
get.
a big deal
I,
for me because
I guess they didn't have much to choose from, or.
that year was probably a pretty tough year. I think there was a couple of people who made movies and some other stuff, but just a neat. When I went off to college, my dad said, make sure you learn while you're there, and make sure you give more than what they gave you. So that was kind of a nice moment. So.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. So did you start the track and field? I guess in high school and all that, or.
Yeah, yeah, it was always a big love of mine, and I had a really good high school coach, and in fact, he went to Eastern Michigan, so that kind of got me that path, and then when my athletic career was over, I figured out what the furthest I could stand to drive into the big town to work, and that's where we bought the farm,
Okay.
just down the ways from Tom.
Okay.
And you know this, Todd, if you drive by there today, when Tom closed down, Tom passed away, we bought all the fencing from Tom's place. We put it around our place, so we kind of have a good reminder of our friend Tom whenever anybody drives through our town.
Oh yeah, I know. I haven't been by there many times since that's happened, but I have been a couple times, and it sure, yeah,
It
it's
always
great.
makes me think of him, when
Yeah,
we every time I go in there, and so it's just kind of a tip of the hat to Tom. He
yeah,
did so much for our area and touched so many lives, so it was really neat. And Tom was really about, I think, what a lot of us are about now, which is this next generation of kids, just helping them get on good horses and have an opportunity to pay forward what was done for us. It took a lot of people in our lives. I'm sure you too.
yeah,
When I started out, I still won't call myself a horseman. My wife Bobby showed horses, and she knows flying lead changes and all that good stuff. And I know how to kick a horse out of the box and get a job done off of him. And that's the extent of my ability level.
right. Well, sometimes I've had some of them reining trainers tell me we make it too complicated. All you got to do is go right, left, stop, and back up.
We play in the shed every night, and we just try to pick a good job for a horse and give
Yeah,
them something to do and make it as much fun for them as us. And we one of our really good horses that he's won quite a lot of stuff we got from you, and
yeah,
he's just turned out to be a peach. And he runs barrels real good, and he won a couple things in down and back, and he's got a
yeah.
pile of buckles and saddles, and the kids have won off of him. So good stuff.
Good deal. How about school? Were you a good student, or
I
were you
was
like?
I was the kind of student that was very active in the principal's office. I was kind of a mischievous guy, I guess, and but I liked school. I liked books a lot in the library and reading, and that kind of led to my love of cowboy poetry. And
Right.
we that's connected me to a whole lot of people all over the country, just
Yeah, that
writing. And
that's where I was kind of wondering where you got. I was always a big reader. I've read all the anything to do with a horse. Actually, one of the first times I got in, well, probably not one of the first times I got in trouble when I can't remember what year it was, maybe 76 when Aladar and Affirmed were running for the Triple Crown. I stole the magazine out of the library at school. And when I got home, I got in trouble because I wasn't supposed to take it. But I still have that magazine today. Some reason they didn't make me take it back.
Libraries. I mean, when you were growing up, probably the same way. We had really good libraries, and my mom would drop us off, and it didn't cost anything, and you could travel the whole world through a book, and started reading a lot of the Western stuff, and it just kind of led to a real interest in this lifestyle. And the neatest thing about this lifestyle is you don't have to be born to it. People
Yep,
are so accepting, and you know what? I don't care if you're 4 or 40. It doesn't matter. If you show up and you ask good questions and you listen to the answers, there's a whole lot of good people that'll just kind of help you move along your way. And the neat thing about horses for me is that I suffer with a neuromuscular disease, so things
yep,
get a little bit more challenging at times for me. But um, people have just been super. I mean, everybody's desire in horses is different. You know, yeah, some people are going to back in the box at the Thomas and Mack, and some of us just got a shed by the farm, and we play with the neighbors and chase cattle and have just we have our fun that way and really enjoy good horses, and that's what I love about it. I've met so many people through the poetry that you know people that are 70, 80 years old and just want to keep going and keep doing it, and
yep.
that's really cool too. And some people don't even get on them anymore, and that's all right too. You know what? Whatever makes people happy, and if the horses are a big part of their life, then that was kind of what Tom gave to me was, hey,
Right.
everybody's different. Respect everybody's disciplines, and maybe you'll learn something from them. So
Yep. Yeah, there's some guys live not far from us that he, during the summertime he'll have a roping a couple days a week, just practicing mostly. But you can see people show up and might not know nothing about a horse and have a couple kids there, and before long the kids are over there, at the rope and shoot chasing the steers up, or it doesn't take long to, if you're there, somebody
yeah.
around horses or cattle are gonna get you get you involved.
They'll get
That's
you a little
so,
bit better and give you a hand. And the thing that I've learned over the years, I got a pretty doggone good one now, and I can throw my 4-year-old granddaughter on him, and he's different for me than he is for her. And I think the really good ones that have wet saddle blankets every day, they just kind of figure out what's being asked, and they kind of dial it accordingly. And having good
yep,
horses like that around is kind of neat.
yep. How about your job? I know you've worked in the automotive industry. I think you got some pretty neat stories from that too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've been pretty blessed. So I went to work for American Motors at first, and they were bought by Chrysler, and I worked for Jeep. I'm an engineer by trade, and kind of worked through over the years, and ended up being the chief engineer at Mopar at the tail end of my career with Chrysler, and got to be a part of racing, and got to race at Baja, and not personally, but I mean I was part of the team that was putting the vehicles out there, and just got to meet a lot of different people. Go out to Utah and run on the Slick Rock, and we did drag racing. I had NHRA was underneath me, and so and the coolest part about it all is just the people that you meet on the travel, and it's kind of a lot the same in our cowboy world, in that there's some really good people, and the ones that are real successful are they just do the little things.
Yep,
It's the devil's in the details. You can just see by the way somebody saddles their horse, or the way they prepare their race car. It's just the good ones kind of rise to the top, and you just being around that's kind of fun to watch
right.
people play at that level.
So you think that people in each, and you've been in several with the racing and the cars and the horses. People are pretty much the same, just the different love for whatever they're doing.
Yeah, whatever makes them happy, but it's just the way they practice and the way that they take care of details, and I mean, you can go to world championship where they're racing in the finals, and you can go to a little dirt track somewhere, and you can pick them out. You know what? They're the cream kind of rise to the top, and it's the same deal. With what we do, you don't have to be around people very long. Just watch how they saddle their horse, or just how they
Right,
keep the things that they have, and it doesn't matter how much money you have, or how famous you are. None of that. All that. I like the part of it where we're just all riding and independent together, and you get to learn stuff from different people. And I'm fascinated by the gear, fascinated to talk to bit makers and spur makers, and kind of learn the history. I'm a big student of the history of
right.
stuff, and so Tom really, Tommy's sales were. I was always looking to come home with something, and learn about it and understand how they went together, and one of my
Yeah,
favorite things I ever did. I mess around a little bit with bits and spurs, and you know and more repairs and rebuilding stuff. And a good friend
right.
of mine, Raul, gave me a bit that brought me a bit that his grandfather had made, and it was ring
Uh-huh.
bit in bronze, and we worked on it and we got it all done. And when I got it all finished to give it back to him, and he turned it and he handed it to his youngest boy, and he
Yeah,
said, "There." He said, "It was given to me in good order. Now you got it in good order, and you know who repaired it." So he said, "Take care of it, and the story. The story just gets bigger."
yep, exactly. I seen a picture with you with Jay Leno. You were out there at his place, or was that at a
Yeah,
racetrack? Or
yeah, really neat guy. So we had done in the early days of the Jeep pickups, we had done a conversion kit at Mopar where you could convert a 4-door JK into a pickup, and we ran into him out at Burbank at his place, and he invited us in. We ended up spending the whole weekend, and we ended up having the first 4-wheel drive. It's still floating around somewhere, that podcast, or that little. It was called Jay's Garage, and it was the first
uh-huh.
4-wheel drive vehicle that went on there. But what was really neat was we spent like the whole weekend, and he took me on a tour of all his vehicles. He's got kind of a little museum there, and he stopped at the very first car, and we're on a golf cart, and he said that this car was traded by Charles Howard. And I said, "Yeah, the man who owns Seabiscuit." He said he traded this car for Seabiscuit's mother after he had won, as he was trying to find that magic again. And he
Really?
and so the stuff in his collection is really neat because he's a history buff, and he likes the stories behind there. So that was the minute I said that, he took me through the rest of his collection, and we had a lot of fun just chatting.
Yeah.
But just a really nice guy.
Oh, cool deal. Yeah, that must have been a neat memory. And there again, you go back to people, if they love something, they want to share it with everybody. You know,
Yeah,
I'm sure him showing you them cars would be like me showing you my horses that I
yeah,
have. You know,
yeah, yeah.
I,
We tune in all the time to see what you're up to, and
yeah,
the one you're standing there now, and I it's just I hope as you get into these more and more, I think it's fun to talk about what your rides were like, and
yeah,
what you got in there, because I think that was one of the neatest things about being at Tommy's, was just sitting around and talking about what people had and what they thought they were capable of doing, or maybe who they would fit. And I really think we've lost a little bit of that with some of the internet, because it's just all listings and listings and you get flooded. But if you get to talk to the guy who's riding the horse, and maybe see a little bit of footage of what he's doing with it. You're going through McDonald's drive-throughs and running through rivers, and
yeah,
and and you know what, you talk to these older men and women, and back in the history of what we love to do. And these horses, they had jobs, every day. The kids were riding them to school. I mean, they had wet saddle blankets, and they got used, and they were part of the family. And boy, they made some really good horses. The stories are just incredible to hear. You can ask somebody 90 years old about a horse, and they'll get a gleam in their eye, and they'll start telling you their stories. And
yeah, yeah,
that's the coolest part about all of it.
yeah. It's funny. Sometimes you want to talk to some people, sometimes you don't. Well, I went to get my hair cut, I don't know, probably a couple months ago. And every time they ask you what you do, you say something about a horse, and they start in my brother, Grants. So I was like, I don't want to talk about anything. I just want her to cut my hair and be done. So she said, "What do you do for a living?" I said, "I cut grass." She says, "Oh, I'm looking for somebody to cut my grass." Then she goes on all about so my little thing didn't work at
You
all.
were
I should
trying
have
to
just
duck the conversation. You got
yeah,
pulled right into it.
it didn't work. But yeah, that's you know going up to Tom's. That was when I first started going up there, I kind of got out of a bad situation, and Tom helped me out of it. Well, I'm sure he knew what situation I was in. I had a guy that I rode some horses for, owed me a bunch of money, and I don't know if he didn't want to pay me, probably didn't have the money to pay me. But anyways, me and Tom started partnering on some horses, and then he'd pay me to come up there. And every time I'd get ready to leave, what do I owe you? Whatever you think, Tom. And I never even had a number in my mind, but every time I left, I was happy. I mean,
Yeah.
he probably didn't have to pay me nothing. I just you know, loved being up there, and it was like having a whole new family with you and Bobby up there, and Regan, and all the girls. They just treated me like I was supposed to be there.
It's just a genuine bunch of people, and
Yeah,
you'd go over the round pen, and Eric Wolford would be riding something for Tom, and then I'd turn on my television, and Eric's on the TV, and I'm like,
yeah,
wait a minute, this guy's pretty good. And
yeah.
it was just genuine people, Bump and Andrea and the different
Oh
people
yeah,
that worked over there and helped out in Montana. And there was just a genuine love. And if you went over there, my favorite story with Tom, I've always rode cow horses, and my wife will yell at me, "You're on the wrong lead," and that's pretty typical. Well, he'll figure it out when we go left, and
yeah,
and Tom invited me over there one night, and all the girls were over there, and I got to ride a show horse. And this as well as I do. When my horse puts his face down to the ground, I need to be looking for where the ambulance is at, usually, or at least getting a good hold of a rein. And I stepped right back off of that horse, and Tom goes, "What's the matter?" And I go, "Man, he's really kind of scaring me." He goes, "Well, he's supposed to do that." I go, "Well, that one just down the road, when he does that, you're going to meet a nurse or two before the evening's out if you don't pay attention."
yep. I don't. I have so many great memories of being up there, and some of it just everybody standing around talking. But the story I told it Tom's funeral, and I'm sure the people that watch this, or hopefully the people who watch this, whether they know Tom or don't know Tom, if you knew him, it's. But the first time I went up there to stay, Tom says, "You want me to get you a motel room, or you can stay at the house?" And I said, "Well, I mean, I can stay at the house. It don't matter." And Regan says, "Just so you know, it's not the best accommodations, and my dad's not a very good host." I don't need anything. So, of course, he took us. We went out. Me, him, and Terry went out to eat, and of course, went by and got some ice cream afterwards. And time we walked in the house, and a lot of people, he's got an older house, and there's a kitchen, and then you walk into the living room, and I stayed in that room in the back. It had a little futon there, and time Tom got to the kitchen, he'd already had his pants off, was standing there in his underwear and no shirt on. He said, I'm going in here to watch TV. If you need anything, let me know."
That was Tom's house, and he had
And
to play cards.
yeah, and I always never was real comfortable staying at other people's houses just because, I mean, you never know or whatever. But from then on, I mean, I felt like it's just as much my home as it was. I never felt uncomfortable there one time, even if he did stand there in his underwear and talk to me for hours at a time.
he he one time he was always we were always pulling stuff on each other, this. And one time my wife clerked for him for a long time and helped Regan and the girls out, and I walk into the sale ring and they go, "Sold to the Muldoons," and here's this donkey, and I'm just shaking my head at him, and I bring that donkey home, and they called him Bruiser. And every morning that donkey would wake me up at 3:45 in the morning, start making racket. But then I started to kind of like him. And
Uh,
and Tom got a pretty good tickle out of it, and I don't think I gave him more than $150. And Tom called me and he goes, "Hey, you still got that donkey? I think I might have somebody who's looking for a donkey." I said, "He's $1,000, Tom. I like him. He's part of the family now. He's all trained." And he never let me forget that. He's like, "Boy, you really hit me pretty hard on that dog." I said, we weren't selling him. The kids were all attached to him, and that donkey lived his whole life out on that farm.
yeah, it's I don't know it. I sure hate missing it. I don't get to come up there. I there at the end. I'd come up, every 2 or 3 months and stay for a week, and it was some great times. Plus, we always got a bunch of horses sold and traded them around, and
See, but
got to
now
go.
I got a couple really good horses I bought from you. So when you come up this way, we can go riding. You've already ridden all about a half of the ones that are here because you kind of
Yep.
become my go-to guys. So
Well, I'm glad they work out. We try to make sure they'll work out some kind of way.
good-minded, yeah.
Yep. Yep. Um, how about Raul and his family? Let's talk about them a little bit. I know, I got to know all them up there too, and his one son is kind of making a pretty big splash, I think, at the rodeos doing his rope work, and
Yep.
it looks like the youngest one is turning to be a pretty good hand too.
So Preston's in college. He's I believe up in Missouri, competing in college rodeo now, and Paxton, the oldest boy, just filled his PRCA card as contract ag,
Uh,
as a trick roper, and he's pretty good calf roper too, and one
yeah,
heck of a bulldogger. I mean, they grew up with world champions in their families, so it's one of those really neat places where you always feel welcome. You go over there and you'd swear you're in the middle of Texas. The way the pens are set up, exactly the same way for their dogging and for their calf roping. And gosh, Rodriguez has made some nice horses they have over the years
yeah,
in this area. And they were always his dad was always the guy that if you were having a problem, you could go ask him a question, and you could visit with him for a while, and he'd help you. He
yeah,
didn't want anything. He's just a good man, and he cared about the horses as much as the people that were riding them, and he'd try to help people kind of fix things up.
yeah. Yep. How about your book you got out? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the new one's out. Here, there you go.
There you go.
So
And if I'm smart enough, I'll try to figure out how to put the link in here too. I always hear everybody say how to do that. Maybe my wife can hopefully show me how.
So you can find my stuff super easy. I'm on Amazon. It's just under the author PT Muldoon, just
Uh-huh.
my initials and my last name. But yeah, I write a lot. It's kind of a neat story. My dad got Parkinson's, and at the end of his battle with Parkinson's, he was just a really neat guy and an iconic guy. But Parkinson's kind of takes a lot of your physical abilities away, and so I had always written, but I never shared it with anybody. I probably threw more poems away, written on the back of notebooks and feed slips, and yeah, I just started reading stuff to him, and he said, I want you to go try to get a book deal, and I said, yeah, right. I've read all how hard this is, but I tried, and I don't know, I had guardian angels or something, but about the third person I talked to give me a book deal, and so I just started writing, reading to my dad, and it just kind of took on its own life. And it's been kind of a really neat blessing because, it doesn't pay a lot to be a cowboy poet. If you talk to anybody other than a very select few, you're not going to get rich and famous doing it.
Right.
But gosh, I've met some of the neatest people on planet Earth, and a lot of the stuff that I try to write is I try to lift others, and so I try to tell people stories. And um, the neatest part is I've made really good friends with some photographers and
Uh-huh.
really generous people to allow me to share their pictures along with my poetry and vice versa. So that part's been fun. The friendships have been everything out of this,
Yeah,
and
I've made a couple poems, and
you've made a couple.
that really makes my day. That one with me and Raw when we're hooking up the ponies at Tom's. That was
I got to see if that one's in here. Let me
that
tell you.
that was
There have been a couple who yeah, oh yeah, here it is. Are you ready for this, everybody out there? So I gotta set the stage up because you gotta understand there's a couple little kids, a pile of ponies, and a harness and a wagon. Okay. And here is Todd and Raul bending down trying to harness these ponies, keep these kids square in the middle of a ring, people walking in and out. And so I think it was before you even made it all the way back to Virginia. I had this written and I threw it up there on Facebook. And
yeah,
I think you sent me a note back from a rest stop and said, no
yeah,
one's safe from the poetry when they go up to Michigan. So
yeah.
here you go. I'm gonna lay one on you for your first podcast.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
it's called Straight Outta Indiana. How many veteran cowboys should it take to hook a rig? The people driving it are little, but the helpers sure are big. It unfolded right before my eyes. Todd and Raul both understood just how to harness ponies up. Wasn't sure that these two could. They fiddled around a minute as that harnessing got done, and I didn't hear no bad words. I was sure I might hear one. And when the job was finished, those kids trotted out of sight. I heard one kid tell the other, "Hope the Dunsels got it right." So that
Yeah,
was that was one of my, hey, I got Todd, I got a picture, I got Todd, and I got Raul, and we've had a lot of fun with it.
yeah. It's I love reading them, and another thing that you really if people follow you on Facebook, and I assume you're on the other stuff, Instagram and that stuff too, but just your positive, and I know you're kind of going through the rough stuff now, but talk about your wall of warriors too. I haven't been there to see it other than the pictures, but I know a couple people that are up there that I do know personally. Of course, Tom being one of
Tom's
them.
up there, yep. Yeah, it became, there's a lot of people out there riding horses and other things, but most of the ones on the wall, at the arena, we started with a lot of rodeo pictures, kids that went out and really did something and maybe, got on TV or made the finals or had fun that way. But then it started to be, you know what? There's a lot of really uplifting people out there, and there's a gal named Jalen White who's going through, brain cancer, and we started to correspond, and she had raised and trained barrel horses and was just kind of an iconic woman out in Utah. And I just got the idea, you know what? I'm gonna get a picture from these people whose lives touch me, that are going through maybe a little more than other people are going through, because they lift one another. And so the wall has just grown and grown and grown of people that we've encountered through the poetry that tell their story. And whether they got, some of them got Lou Gehrig, some of them got MS. There's a cowboy out west that's still riding on the big ranges with MS. You got to have a little help to get on the horse, but it's like, boy, there for the grace of God. I mean, when you start meeting these people who say, okay, maybe it's a little tougher than it used to be, but I can still do it. And that was kind of the spirit of what my dad and his battle with Parkinson's was. And so it, the Wall of Warriors is where I ride my horses every night. So it's pretty hard to get down in the mouth when you're riding by people who carried way more than you did. And we got to
Right.
know a couple really really neat people through that. Amberley Schneider's up on the wall, and she's become a friend, and she's overcome a whole lot. And you know if you wake up in the morning and you go out there and you go, boy, today's a little tough, and then you look up on the wall and there's a girl who's paralyzed, who's running the circuit strapped into a saddle. It's like, all right, I
Yeah.
think I can pull it together and keep going. So
Right. Right. That's like with Tom, the how quick his deal went. I mean, it was just so sudden and fast. And you know, I don't know if there's anybody than other than probably my parents that had a big impact on my life. I always kind of said it was like losing my dad, my best friend and business partner, all in the same day.
and we all know people like that, and he was one of those folks who, you might be having a tough day and you could spend 10 minutes with that guy, and you'd walk out of there and go, it's a pretty good day.
Yeah.
It and Tom's tagline was always, where are we going for lunch? If you spend any time with Tom at all, it was, okay, all right, we've ridden enough horses, where are we going for
Yep.
lunch?
When I would be up there for them week, in between sales or whatever, him and Montana would always have a big argument, because not an argument, but they'd go back and forth because Montana wanted to get out of there and go home when we were finished, and Tom wanted to go lunch. So he tried to get me to eat lunch, and Montana would try to make me stay and ride
keep
two or three
keep
more.
work
So
keep working through. Keep
so
working
she,
through.
but Tom usually won. Every once in a while, she'd talk him into, going and getting something and bringing it back there to eat. But no, it was a great time. That's for sure.
One
And
of my favorite things about this industry, and just horses in general, whether you're a hunter jumper, or whether you're an eventer, or whether you're a rodeo guy or girl, breakaway, or calf roper, or rough stock, it doesn't matter. This is one of the only things that I've ever encountered in my life where you can go out, and some of you go out and really make a great run at something, and then turn around, come back, and help the next guy make a better run, or next girl.
yeah,
And boy, that's cool, because it's about way more than yourself. It's kind of a cool community. And the poetry is kind of the same way. It's amazing, all the I'm now connected to people whose tapes I listened to when I was running up and down the road, and going to ropings and stuff. And Brent Hill's become a real good friend. And it's just funny, those people that you listen to on the radio, or you listen to their tapes, and now they're just people telling you about their day, and they got a cool horse, or maybe one unloaded them, and we all got
yeah,
good stories there too.
yeah. There's always a million stories. That's for sure. It don't take long to get you get two or three horse people together, and there's gonna be some stories
but
floating
they but
around.
they but they help each other.
Yeah,
It's like, I love reading about the Dorrance brothers, and I like Buck Brannaman and Ray Hunt, and
yep,
people that, I mean, they were very giving. I mean, you read those stories about those guys, and it wasn't about making money. It wasn't about selling stuff. It was about helping horses, and helping
yep,
people with horses and figure it out. And we've all had that horse where we just don't get along with, and
Oh yeah.
maybe he goes down the road and becomes the best horse somebody right down the street ever had. And it's just sometimes it's just talking to other people and figuring out how they do stuff. And I love the internet and I hate the internet because sometimes I think there's a tendency to like be too harsh on people
Oh
rather than everybody's just try to figure out how to get along with their horse and maybe
well,
have a little
you
fun.
know, just like I was talking about that guy earlier that kind of got me in with Tom. If he had the money to pay me, I might not have never. It's amazing how God works in mysterious ways. And that guy wasn't a bad guy. Just didn't manage his money right and couldn't pay me. And
Yeah, just
of course,
just
I was mad at the time, but it all worked out where I got to be part of Moore's Horse Company for a while.
yeah. It's I wrote for a while and I don't perform a whole bunch in front of crowds and a lot of my friends do, but and I'd apply for Elko every year and I'd get
Uh-huh.
turned down and I got a little down in the mouth about not getting picked and I didn't get picked for a reason. There's a whole lot of people that apply for that deal and I'm sitting home kind of feeling sorry for myself because I got another rejection letter and you know and a buddy of mine sends me a picture of one of my poems at up at the Four Sixes Ranch up in the bunkhouse, and
Yeah,
he goes, we like what you wrote. It's fine, and that's the beauty of this industry. I think this is the beauty of our sport and what we love to do is, the real payoff is you're watching a kid catch a calf for the first time and that $1 million smile on their face. You know, you you can't just imagine what it feels like to just help the next bunch and see that moment when it clicks and we all recognize one another just you can kind of recognize the people that got this in their blood and it
yep.
would go without groceries before they'd let their horses go without food and
And the stories I've had. There's one guy that his wife shows horses with us some down here, and we'll sit around. Different guys sit around and tell stories. And one morning, after of course we had a few beers the night before, and we're telling stories and stuff. The next morning, he says, "Ain't no way them stories are true." I said, "Well, there might be a little embellishing on some of them, but
but a lot
but
of them are
not
pretty true.
99. Believe it or not, they've happened before. That's for sure."
The years I rode a horse for a lot of years. We lost him last year. His name was Tiggs, and
Yep.
I had him since he was just a young colt, and we rode him for 33 years. He's just that horse, one of those horses that I could do absolutely anything. And I grew up on stories of Roy Rodriguez roping a deer, and his effort was way better than mine. But I tried for years to figure it out, and he always told me to use a practice rope because the deer don't make pressure. They go away from the pressure back towards your horse. So we were out one night and Tom's daughter Chelsea, their family had a dog named Stella, and they stayed at our place for a while. Chelsea and
Uh-huh.
Mike and Stella would go out with me, and the neighbors had this big tall stand of corn, and we're riding along there, and I can hear all these deer running through the corn, and Stella's out there just moving them. And man, I build the biggest loop I can build. I'm like, this is my chance. I got a row of corn and I got a dog working for me. And the first one come out and it was about 8 point buck, and I wasn't having nothing to do with that. The next one was doe, and then there was a little one, and I got it put on there, I got it tight, and I had a little bit of hair left in the breakaway. So I
Uh,
could prove that I got it done. But Mike was back at the farm. He's about a half a mile. He said, I thought you got hurt. You were yelling so loud. I said, I got it.
uh,
Just an old
yes.
guy with a slow horse and a big loop and a dog helping him in a
Yeah.
cornfield. We got one roped.
Yeah. Yeah. The the first horse. This had been years and years ago. I don't know what year. I went out to the World Show sale, and I knew Tom from horse sales and stuff. You know, we had never done any really business before, and of course, all the girls were always with him at the horse sales, and they'd bring 8 or 10 horses to each horse sale. So I kind of knew him. But we went out to Oklahoma City to the World Show sale, and they had usually 3 or 4 days of sales out there. And there was a real pretty sorrel filly. I think she was a 2-year-old with a flaxen mane and tail by a son of Shining Spark. And that was, years ago before everything was so expensive. But me and Tom were both bidding on her, and some other guy ends up buying her for, I don't know, 2,500 or something, and we both got out, thought it was too much. Well, Tom walks over and says, "Man, that was a pretty filly, wasn't it?" "Oh yeah, I said I really liked her. I just couldn't give that much." So we're standing there talking, and they say, "We got to rerun this one. Something happened. The guy that bought it didn't think he bought it, and it was that horse." And Tom says, "Well, instead of bidding against each other," he said, "I'll just buy it. You can take it home and ride it, and we'll partner on it." I said, "Sure." So we bought it. I think it cost 1,500, 1,600. I go back and get it out of the stall, and it's got a blanket on it. And the people that owned it were standing there, and the lady's like, "Well, you can just have the blanket." I said, "Damn, that's a $70, $80 blanket. We're already making money." So I jump it on the trailer and start back home, and we get into, I don't know, Georgia. I know I was come the southern way home to back to Virginia, and it started getting hot the next day. So I said, well, I'm gonna take that blanket off that filly. It's kind of cold or getting hot. I went back in there, and that thing was just as goofy as it could be. I couldn't get the blanket. About 15 minutes later, I said, I'm just going to leave the blanket on it. So I get it home, and it took me a day to get the saddle on it where I could get the girth up. I looked like a beginner natural horseman out there. I had a rope over its back, trying. I get the saddle on it, put it in the round pen. It kicks all the wood off my round pen. Stays loose for about 2 days before I could catch it again. Well, I get it where I can ride it, and I can't get off it without somebody holding it. So, so anyway, I get it. We're going to take it. We take it to Lexington, Virginia, to the horse sale up there. And Tom gets there, and he said, "Well, how's our horse?" I said, "Tom, this is a goofy son of a bitch." I said, it might only look like I rode it a few times, but I rode it a bunch. So, so she wasn't very big. So we got this other girl to ride it through the ring for us, and it brings $2,200. We're just as tickled as we can be. So I said, well, that's fine. So they called me to go to the office, and I was like, oh, the guy's already rejecting it. So I go to the office, and they said, they got a guy that bought a horse that wants you to haul it home. So I go find the guy, and he says, how much you charge me to haul it home? I said, where you live? And he lived about 30 minutes from me. I said, I'll charge you 200. He reaches in his pocket, gives me 200. He said, I just bought a filly. I'd love to get you to ride it for me. He said, what do you charge? And I think at the time I charged like 800. He said, well, I'm going to pay you for 3 months. He reaches in there, hands me that cash. I said, man, this is a great day. But then he hands me the ticket with the horse's name on it.
It's your horse.
I, I walked around for about 2 hours kicking the dirt and all this stuff, trying to decide if I wanted to give this wad of money back. But I finally was like, there ain't no way I want to ride this son of a gun again. So I went and I'll say, I can haul it home for you, but I'm way too busy to ride it for you. But it gets crazy at some of the stuff that's happened over the years.
The neat part about it though is, and I'm seeing you're probably seeing the difference too, is we're getting a lot more kids coming out and getting an interest in it. And I know horses are expensive right now, but people are still finding a way to get, to save up and get something good. And boy, I'm seeing a lot of really neat kids coming into this and roping and doing the reining and get a lot of kids asking questions. And I just hope people take the time to just help them rather than crush.
Well, I have told people over the years that this may be expensive, but 99% of the kids that get into horses and stick with it for a while turn out to be pretty productive members of society.
Yeah, and even the ones that don't stay with it. I was a 4-H leader, and
Yep.
my wife was too for a long time here in our county. And you know what? I see kids that are the children and grandchildren of people that we started out with, and even if they didn't go into horses, they took something away from that for their confidence, and they had a chance to be a part of something and be a part of a community. That's that's the good part. I think it makes people more confident, and it makes people have a little bit more understanding about taking care of things and looking after stuff, and maybe
Yep.
not so much me 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 me. The best horsemen that I've met in my lifetime are all very humble guys. They're
Oh yeah.
and girls. They're just
Yep. Yep. That's one thing about them horses. They don't care what you've won, what you've done,
no.
how tough you are, how anything. They can humble you up quicker
the
than
ground
anything.
the ground is just as hard if you got a world championship buckle on as if you're
Yep.
just a dunce like me, just trying to get along with one and figure it out. But
Yep.
the other thing you hear when you talk to a lot of these guys, and that's the way it was in this area. A lot of people don't realize this part of Michigan where we live was kind of the jumping off point for where the wagon train's headed west down the Chicago Road. So
Uh-huh.
rodeo goes way back here. I think we have the oldest rodeo association in the United States. The Michigan Ropers, I think, started in the 20s here.
Okay.
And it was just, our area here it's called the Irish Hills because during the potato famine, a lot of people from Ireland emigrated here and settled. They knew dairy farms and they knew how to raise grass
Yep.
and cattle. And then a lot of people like Roy's family came from southern Texas, because there was good water here and good grass. And so
Right.
it kind of took hold. We're kind of a well kept secret. I always
Right.
laugh whenever I go somewhere with my Stetson on and people go, where are you from? And I go, Michigan. And they go, there ain't no cowboys in Michigan. Yeah, they are. You just got to look a little harder.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of pretty good ones I've met over the years, and certainly that family. So
Yeah. It's a beautiful area up there, that's for sure, and full of great people. Other than Rocky, Rocky's up there. If y'all could get rid of
we got to
Rocky,
give Rocky a hard time. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Uh, he still calls me about once a week, check on me, and make sure I'm not working too hard. I I when they had that auction, that stool he used to sit on, I bought that. I keep telling him I got it here
You
for
got
y'all.
it.
Need to come down here and sit in it. Yeah. So, well, I'm sure we could go on forever, but I need to talk to Regan. I talked to her not long after Tom died about doing one of these, and probably neither one of us could have got through it at that point. And I'd love to get her and the girls together or separately or whatever, and tell his life story. I know it goes back. His dad was big into the horses too, and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, gosh, I appreciate being invited on here. And if you
Oh
ever
no,
if you ever need a poem, just tag me in, Todd. I
uh, uh,
I usually have something fresh I can throw into the mix. But I think this is neat. A lot of what we did, kind of coming up and doing this stuff was a lot of learning from one another. And this might be kind of a neat place for people to ask questions and get to meet
yeah.
other people behind the scenes.
I just love. I've always loved going places and listening to stories, people telling how they got involved, and I mean, just like learning you had a dairy farm and all that. I've known you for years, but sometimes you just don't realize where people come from or what they did. And I knew you were in the automotive field, but I had no idea to what level. And it
Yeah,
just
my deal started with I love cattle and I liked raising them and liked that part of the business, and then the horses came after. I didn't learn to ride till later in my life, and so I had to ask a lot of questions and I probably had to look fairly dumb a few times, but they tell me the definition of learning something is to be willing to look a little foolish at the start and
yeah.
kind of dust your pants off and try again.
That's what a friend of mine was talking about golf, and that's what he said. He tells people he's good enough not to be embarrassed about how bad he is anymore. And that's about how horses are. You hope to get good enough you're not embarrassed at how bad you are. And
I just try to figure out a way to get along with them. But I'll tell you one story. Is when my wife came to horses a lot later, and she went out and won a real nice buckle with working with Tom and his daughters, and
uh,
especially Chelsea, and at the Congress for Buckskin. And she won a nice big old buckle, and I'd never won a buckle. I don't claim to be anything more than a guy who can get a job done on a horse, and people don't cover their eyes when I show up to help. But it was like my dad played golf for years and years and years, and my mom took it up late in life and got a hole in one before he did, and hung it up on the wall. And I always laugh because she always tells me I got a buckle before you did. So
yeah, yeah. Nope. I always say I got another family up in Michigan. That's for sure. And I sure love all you guys up there, and I wish it was 10, 9 hours closer than it is, where we could come visit and hang out a little more. But
well,
uh,
you're welcome anytime. And if anybody wants to read any of the poetry, I wore my hat today. So we got our cow side of our deal is called Square Girl Cattle Company, and we got a Facebook page for that. And I throw a lot of poetry up there. So if somebody wants to read them and get a chuckle, you can easily find us on Facebook there. So
all right, well, I sure appreciate it, Pat, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon, and hopefully we can. I've been putting it off, not doing them. And I was like, I just need to make myself start doing them. And this app, I found it seems like it's pretty easy to do. So I don't have any excuses not to keep doing them.
well, we'll see if we can put together some good videos for you here and there because I grabbed the app too. So we
Okay.
usually have some funny stuff that happens with all the kids and horses and things that we do around the place. So
There you go. There you go. All right. Thank you, sir.
thanks, Todd.
Yep. Bye bye.